Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I was halfway through setting down the tray of deviled eggs homemade because Aunt Margie insists nobody else does em right when Vanessa's voice sliced through the chatter like a damn electric carving knife. She had that sing-songy tone, the one she uses right before she says something petty and pretends it's a compliment. "So, Aaron," she starts, loud enough to snag attention from the folding tables, "you're still at that little place, right? What was it again? Apple Barn or something?" Someone chuckled. A few turned to look at me. But it wasn't until she followed it with, "Still just a waitress," that the whole group actually erupted. Even my mom laughed. Not hard, not cackling. Just a little stifled giggle into her iced tea. But it might as well have been a gunshot to the gut. That one soft sound hit harder than anything Vanessa had said. I smiled through it, even forced a laugh too. What else could I do? I was surrounded by plastic chairs, solo cups, and relatives I only saw once a year, if that. You don't start World War III over potato salad. But inside? Oh, I was burning. I stood there, clutching a serving spoon, and felt my stomach flip the way it used to back in high school when the rich girls laughed about my thrift store shoes. I wanted to say something clever. I wanted to drop a truth bomb so hard it would echo into next year's reunion. But I stayed quiet because I've learned something over the years. The best revenge doesn't interrupt the party. It waits patiently. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not ashamed of what I do. I've worked in the service industry since I was 19. Started as a hostess who got yelled at for seating the wrong table. Worked my way up to server, then trainer, then assistant manager, and eventually landed the GM role at the Grey Willow, one of the most respected mid-scale restaurants in the state. But the thing is, people like Vanessa don't understand that. To her, anything that doesn't involve a LinkedIn bio or a cubicle is beneath her. "Must be nice," she added, as if being just a waitress meant I spent my shifts lounging in a booth, sipping iced coffee and scrolling Instagram. Low stress, good tips, no real responsibilities. Honestly, I'm kinda jealous. That last line almost got a standing ovation. Cousin Trish literally clapped. Aunt Margie smirked while chewing coleslaw. And again, my mom said nothing. You'd think it would have stopped there, but no. Vanessa went on to share how she'd recently left her toxic job at a startup. Something about being too visionary for her boss's comfort. "They said I was too much of a disruptor," she claimed, sipping from her mimosa like she invented brunch. "But I'm not worried. I'm in between opportunities. Something big will come." She said that while stabbing at watermelon cubes like they owed her rent. And that's when I felt it, that flicker. The quiet, electric hum of karmic timing. Because I already knew something she didn't. 2 weeks earlier, our regional team had decided to open a second location in the city. Same brand, same leadership. And I'd been tapped to build the management team. Resumes had started trickling in. Most were forgettable, some promising. And one? Well, one had made me laugh out loud in the middle of reviewing inventory logs. Vanessa Harper. Marketing background. Passionate about food service. Seeking entry into hospitality management. When I saw her name, I stared at the screen for a good 30 seconds, waiting for my coffee to finish brewing and wondering if this was some elaborate joke. But there it was, right under skills, proficient in conflict resolution, team leadership, and customer experience. The same woman who once called our server a gutter Barbie at my birthday dinner wanted to lead a team of them. So while Vanessa kept holding court by the potato chips, painting her career break as a noble sabbatical, I just smiled. Because I knew she'd be walking into my office soon, resume in hand, eyes bright with desperation. And I wasn't going to say a damn thing to stop her. After all, I'm just a waitress, right? The rest of the reunion went as these things do. Kids ran through sprinklers. Uncle Dave brought out his mystery meat grill surprise. Someone spilled beer on the cornhole boards, and a baby cried for no clear reason for 20 minutes. But me? I was floating. Not with joy, exactly, but with anticipation. The kind that hums just under the skin, like static before a lightning strike. Mom cornered me near the coolers later and said something about not taking it personally. I nodded. Didn't even look up from my canned soda. She meant well. Sort of. But she never defended me, never corrected Vanessa. Not once. Not when I was 13 and Vanessa mocked my clothes. Not when I was 20 and working doubles while Vanessa bragged about internships she barely showed up for. Not today. I packed up early. Told them I had to get ready for an early morning order drop. It wasn't a lie. We had a new produce vendor, and I didn't trust him yet. Vanessa called out, "Bye, Aaron," like we were besties. I waved without turning. As I walked to my car, the air smelled like overcooked hot dogs and sunscreen. I climbed into the driver's seat, rolled down the window, and just sat there a moment. The sun was dipping low, painting everything gold. I could still hear their laughter, faint and distant now, like background noise from another life. I pulled out my phone, opened the restaurant's hiring app, and bookmarked Vanessa's resume. I didn't know how she'd react when she saw me sitting on the other side of that desk. But I knew how I'd feel. Ready. 2 weeks after the reunion, I was sitting in my office early on a Monday morning, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped ceramic mug that said "World's Okayest Manager." When I opened the applicant dashboard and saw her name right there at the top of the new submissions list, Vanessa Harper. I stared at it for a few seconds, half convinced it had to be some kind of joke, maybe one of those fake spam resumes people submit for kicks. But no, the email matched her actual Gmail, and attached was a PDF with a photo of her smiling like someone who thought she was the next Oprah of marketing. It wasn't even a bad resume, I'll give her that much. Clean format, big words, bullet points full of buzz phrases like multi-channel strategy and brand growth synergy, whatever the hell that means in the real world. She had listed a few part-time consulting gigs after her last real job, and somewhere down near the bottom, under new directions in career development, she wrote that she was pivoting into hospitality and believed her leadership skills would translate seamlessly into restaurant operations. I had to set my coffee down before I laughed hard enough to spill it. She had no idea, of course. No clue that the general manager she'd just applied to interview with was the same cousin she'd mocked in front of 36 relatives while balancing a paper plate full of chicken wings. The way our directory was set up, it listed my initials and title but not my full name unless you went digging, and Vanessa was never one for details that didn't benefit her directly. So I scheduled the interview myself, under the name E. Miller, using our system's default email. I gave her a polite confirmation and even told the front host to expect someone named Vanessa and direct her back to my office without saying a word. I spent the rest of the week preparing, not just paperwork and standard interview questions, but myself. I had to practice keeping my face neutral, my tone flat, because as satisfying as I expected this to be, I wasn't going to throw professionalism out the window. No, this was going to be slow, clean, and surgical. The kind of revenge you savor over time, like a good stew or a long book with a twist at the end. That Friday, the day of the interview, I wore my nicest black blazer, the one I save for vendor meetings and visits from corporate. I put on light makeup and pulled my hair back in a bun so tight it could have doubled as a security measure. My office was spotless, not a receipt out of place. I even made sure the framed Employee Appreciation Award on the wall was level. When the time came, I sat down, straightened a small stack of resumes, and waited. Right at 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I glanced up just as the hostess poked her head in and said, "Interview's here," then stepped aside. And there she was. Vanessa, standing in the doorway, all blown-out curls and calculated confidence, wearing a navy blazer 2 sizes too tight and heels that definitely weren't made for kitchen floors. She was smiling that polite, practiced smile she probably thought made her look competent, but only made her look like she was trying to sell something. Then she saw me. I will never forget the expression that crossed her face. It happened fast, like a flicker, first confusion, then realization, then that flushed, pinched look people get when they're about to vomit or cry. She opened her mouth and closed it again like a fish stuck in a bucket. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, deadpan, and gestured to the chair across from me. "Have a seat," I said calmly, flipping her resume over on the desk. "Vanessa, right?" She nodded, stiffly. It took her a second to walk to the chair and sit down, and even longer to meet my eyes. I let the silence stretch just a little longer than polite, watching her squirm. And then I smiled, pleasant, professional. "So, Vanessa," I said, leaning back a little, tapping her resume like I didn't already have it memorized, "tell me what brings you to the Grey Willow today." She cleared her throat, adjusting the sleeves of her blazer like it was suddenly strangling her. "Well, I've been looking for a career pivot. Actually," she began, her voice shakier than I remembered it ever being. "Something more people-focused. I think hospitality aligns with my strengths in management, communication, and strategic thinking." I almost choked. Strategic thinking. The same woman who once tried to return a half-eaten salad because the lettuce felt judgmental was now claiming to be a strategist. I nodded along, taking notes like this wasn't the single most awkward interaction of her life. She kept going, though, about how she wanted to be part of something dynamic, how she missed working with a team, how food service had always fascinated her, though the closest she'd probably come to it was yelling at a barista for misspelling her name. I asked standard questions and watched her stumble through every one, clearly thrown off her game. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I said, "I've been here almost 11 years, since 2019. She nodded, but something didn't click in her face. Probably too busy trying not to sweat through her blouse. But anyone paying attention would have caught the mistake. "It's only been 6 years. Not 11. I said it just to see if she'd correct me. She didn't. By the end of the interview, her confidence had deflated like a sad balloon someone forgot to tie. I closed her folder and stood up, offering my hand like a true professional. "Thanks for coming in, Vanessa. We'll be in touch." She blinked, like she couldn't quite believe it was ending already. She shook my hand like it was a dead fish, said a flat thank you, and left the office without looking back. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a long, slow breath. I didn't feel triumphant, not really. It was something quieter, something colder. A private, low hum of satisfaction that comes from watching someone finally eat the words they once used to choke you. And that was just the beginning. Vanessa came in that morning dressed like she was about to present quarterly reports to a room full of board executives, not interview for a mid-level floor supervisor role at a restaurant that operated on equal parts adrenaline, caffeine, and people skills. Her blazer was pressed to perfection, her heels clicked in rhythm down the hallway, and she carried a leather folio like it held the secrets to unlocking world peace. But none of that mattered when she sat down across from me and couldn't hide the way her jaw clenched every time I spoke. From the start, the air was thick with tension, not the kind you can brush off with polite laughter, but the kind that crawls down your neck and settles between your shoulder blades like cold sweat. I gave her the usual intro I offered to any applicant, how the Grey Willow was a locally rooted, service-forward brand that valued consistency, accountability, and strong team dynamics. She nodded along like she was absorbing it, but the way her eyes darted around the room made it clear she wasn't really listening. I asked her what she thought good customer service looked like, and she gave me a rehearsed answer that sounded like it came from a blog post titled Top 5 Tips for Hospitality Success. She said things like meeting customer expectations in a timely manner and creating an inviting atmosphere for guest retention. It was the kind of stuff you'd say to fill dead air when you hadn't actually worked a real service shift in your life. Not once did she mention patience, not once did she say the word empathy. I leaned forward and asked her to walk me through a specific situation where a customer was upset and how she handled it. She paused, blinked slowly, then said, "Well, I've never worked in food service directly, but in my last role, we had a client who didn't like our campaign's direction, so I arranged a Zoom call to realign expectations." I didn't even blink, just let the silence do the work. After a beat too long, she added, I imagine it's a similar skill set, calming people down, refocusing their attention, maintaining professionalism. Similar skill set, she said. Like diffusing a screaming parent whose toddler just spilled syrup all over booth 7 was the same thing as rescheduling a marketing meeting because someone didn't like a PowerPoint font. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I asked her how she would handle a server calling out mid-shift on a Friday night while 2 parties of 10 were being seated. She opened her mouth and then shut it again. Her face pinched in confusion, like I'd just asked her to explain quantum physics. I guess I'd try to delegate, she said. Or maybe ask one of the other staff members to take over? There was a question mark at the end of every word. It was clear she'd never worked a floor plan, never flipped a section on the fly, never had to prep ramekins while smoothing over a birthday party meltdown near the dessert station. I nodded slowly and jotted down something on her resume, nothing real, just a doodle to make her squirm. Then I paused, letting the tension sit there like a 4th person in the room, and said, it's funny. People don't always realize that working in restaurants is about reading the room in real time, constantly. It's like playing chess, but the board is on fire and the pieces are screaming for ranch dressing. She gave a stiff laugh, probably trying to seem casual, but her face was already losing color. I could see it in the way she crossed and uncrossed her legs, how her posture started to fold in on itself. I kept going, calmly, conversationally. It's the only job I know where you can get $100 tip and a drink thrown in your face within the same shift and still have to clock back in like nothing happened. She tried to chime in, maybe redirect the conversation back to her resume, but I wasn't done. I once spent a double shift cleaning puke off a booster seat while crying in the walk-in freezer during my 10-minute break, I said, not with bitterness, but with a clarity that comes from having survived it. It was a Wednesday, middle of July, the fryer was down, and my feet were bleeding through my sneakers. That was the day I realized I was either going to run this place or let it break me. She didn't have anything to say to that. Not a single word. That's when I realized something important. Vanessa didn't come here looking for a job. She came here looking for an identity she could wear like a borrowed jacket, one that might make her look like she hadn't failed. But we're not a rescue mission. We're a restaurant. And we're hiring, but not desperate. I glanced at the clock. We'd only been talking for 18 minutes, which was about 15 more than I'd planned. I stood up and offered my hand again, watching her hesitate just long enough to make it awkward. Well, I said with the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, thanks for coming in, Vanessa. We'll be in touch. She gathered her things slowly, like she didn't quite believe it was over, and walked out with her spine too straight, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. As the door shut behind her, I sat down and stared at the wall for a long moment, remembering every shift I ever questioned my own worth, every time I told myself I didn't need to be proud, I just needed to pay rent. And now here I was, watching the same girl who once rolled her eyes at my work name tag walk out of my office unable to answer the simplest question about teamwork. She had the degrees, the buzzwords, the expensive shoes. But I had the scars and, more importantly, I had the keys. And she didn't even have a clue. It started, like most family explosions do these days, not with a phone call or a confrontation in a church parking lot, but with a ding in the group chat titled Harper Fam Jams, a thread that had mostly been dormant except for the occasional birthday gif or forwarded prayer chain from Aunt Margie. The last time anyone had really paid attention to it was when someone accidentally added a cousin's new boyfriend, and he sent a shirtless gym mirror selfie thinking it was a different group. But this time, the message wasn't funny or random. It was Vanessa, typing like her fingers were fueled by pure fire. I just had the most humiliating job interview of my life, she began, and the messages kept coming like a slow leak under a kitchen sink, one after another, passive-aggressive and dramatic, written with the kind of performative grace only someone truly losing their composure could manage. "Can't believe I was set up by my own family," she wrote, all caps like she was trying to summon divine intervention. No one told me Aaron was the manager at that place. I walked in thinking I was being considered for a leadership role. Instead, I got interrogated like a criminal by someone who's been handing out menus her whole life. That one? That line lit the whole thread on fire. Cousin Trish sent a row of shocked face emojis. Aunt Margie responded with a cryptic, "Oh dear." Uncle Dave said nothing, which honestly meant more than if he'd written a novel. But my mother, bless her, or maybe curse her, she didn't stay silent. She called me. Not a text, not a "hey, are you okay?" or "what happened?" Just a full volume ring 5 minutes after Vanessa's rant started making the rounds. I knew it was coming. I let it go to voicemail the first time, then the second, and finally picked up on the third ring, bracing myself like someone stepping barefoot onto hot pavement. "Aaron," she said, her voice already climbing the hill of disappointment, "Vanessa just told the family group you embarrassed her in an interview." I stayed silent for a few seconds, let her sit with that sentence like a piece of gristle stuck between her teeth. "Did you?" she asked, softer this time, like maybe she wanted to believe it wasn't true. "I interviewed her like I would anyone else," I said, my voice flat as the stainless steel prep tables in my kitchen. Maybe a little less warmly than usual, but nothing unprofessional. She sighed into the receiver, one of those long, loaded sighs that carried the weight of every unsaid thing from the last decade. "You could have warned her, Aaron." She said she was blindsided. Hurt. And that's when it snapped clean and sharp like a dry twig under a boot. I didn't yell, but my voice turned hard, sharp-edged like I had finally found the part of me that refused to keep swallowing it. She laughed. "Mom," I said, and the silence that followed told me she knew exactly what I meant. She mocked me. In front of everyone. "And you laughed with her." "That's not fair," she said quickly, too quickly. "You know I didn't mean it like that. It was just easier to laugh than to defend your daughter." I asked, not waiting for her to finish. "I've worked my ass off for 15 years. 15. I've cleaned up vomit and worked doubles and missed Christmases and birthdays because I was too busy managing other people's chaos. And still, every time Vanessa walks in with her fake business jargon and overpriced shoes, the whole family forgets I exist unless I'm carrying a tray." There was nothing for a long moment. Just breathing. I imagined her standing in the kitchen, hand on the counter, eyes on the floor. "She was just embarrassed," my mom finally said, as if that explained or excused anything. "You two have always had that tension." "No," I said, my voice steady now. "She's always had that superiority complex, and the rest of you let her." I hung up before she could reply, before the guilt could trickle in like it always did when we fought, and I started wondering if I was being too harsh. But this time, the guilt didn't come. Instead, something else bubbled up, a kind of defiant peace I hadn't felt in years. That night, after the last table had cleared and the kitchen had been scrubbed back to a shine, I pulled out my phone and recorded a short video in front of the walk-in freezer. No makeup, hair tied back, apron still smudged from sauce and sweat. I looked straight into the lens and said, "Funny thing about hospitality. People think it's all smiles and refills and friendly greetings. But sometimes, the hardest part isn't the customers, it's your own family treating you like a joke." I paused, gave the faintest smirk, then added, "But don't worry. We don't confuse humiliation with hospitality here. We serve both with precision." I posted it without hashtags, without tagging anyone, just raw into the algorithm. Went asleep with zero expectations. By morning, the video had 52,000 views and counting. Comments ranged from "Preach, girl," to "This is the most relatable thing I've ever seen." A few shared their own stories, nurses, janitors, retail workers, all echoing the same truth. Dignity doesn't come with a title. Around noon, I got a call from our regional director, Kendra, who never contacted me unless it was serious. I picked up thinking maybe someone had complained or a health inspection got moved up. Instead, she said, Just saw your freezer video. That was fierce. Corporate's been looking for someone to lead culture training for the new store. You ever think about stepping up into development? I blinked, standing near the prep counter with gloves still on my hands, half a tomato in front of me. I'm listening, I said slowly, my heart beginning to pound in a different kind of rhythm. Let's talk Monday, she replied. You've got the voice we need. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the metal of the fridge door for a while, trying to reconcile the girl who once sobbed after being tipped with pocket change with the woman who might soon be training leaders on how to run a kitchen with grace. Vanessa's words in the group chat didn't sting anymore. Not really. Because somewhere between that freezer and that phone call, I'd stopped needing their approval. And I was starting to wonder if they'd ever deserved mine. 3 weeks passed like a slow burn, just enough time for the tension to drift away, but not long enough for the aftertaste of it all to fade. Things at the restaurant had found their rhythm again, the staff finally settling into a flow after the chaos of hiring rounds and holiday prep. I was back to the usual whirlwind, handling inventory orders, covering the host stand when people called out, and smoothing over every little hiccup that came with running a place that lived and died by people's moods and cravings. But I won't lie, every time the front door chimed open during a brunch rush, a small part of me still glanced up, wondering if she'd dare walk in. And on the second Sunday of the month, right in the middle of our busiest brunch service of the quarter, she did. Vanessa walked in wearing oversized sunglasses like she thought she was dodging paparazzi in Los Angeles instead of ordering mimosas in a mid-range Tulsa restaurant. She had 3 women with her, all styled in that curated, effortlessly casual look that still probably cost them half a paycheck. I watched them from the pass window, invisible in the way managers often are everywhere and nowhere at once. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy talking, gesturing too widely for a story that probably wasn't that interesting, and scanning the space like she owned it. Her posture was that same stiff kind of self-assurance I remembered from our high school Thanksgivings, the kind built on hoping no one asked the right questions. My hostess seated them near the front, in full view of the floor, and I let her enjoy the illusion for a few minutes, just long enough for her to think she'd walked in unbothered. Then I called over one of our servers, Maria, the sharpest of the brunch crew, and handed her a custom order slip. The drink was a spin on a classic mimosa, made with blood orange juice, dry prosecco, a sprig of rosemary, and a splash of elderflower liqueur. We didn't have it on the menu. We didn't even name it until that moment. I wrote it down in big, bold letters, just a waitress. Maria glanced at the name, then at me, raised her eyebrow with that wicked little grin that told me she was in on the joke without needing the full backstory. I just nodded. She walked the drink over to Vanessa's table with the kind of smooth confidence that made our regulars leave 5-star reviews. Set it down carefully in front of Vanessa with a smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. This one's on the house, Maria said sweetly, loud enough for the entire table to hear. From our GM, Aaron. She wanted to welcome you personally. You could have heard the silence cut through the room if it weren't for the jazz trio playing near the back. Vanessa didn't look up. She didn't touch the drink. She just stared at it like it was a lit stick of dynamite. Her friends looked around, confused, trying to piece together what just happened without asking questions that might unravel the day. I gave it a few minutes, let her marinate in it, and then made my way around the dining area with my tablet, checking in with tables, refilling coffee, doing the things that make managers look engaged when really we're keeping tabs. When I reached her section, I stopped just long enough for her to know it was deliberate. I didn't address her by name. I didn't pull her aside. I just looked directly at her, smiled coolly, and said, "Enjoy brunch. Service is everything, right?" And then I walked away. She never responded, never even made eye contact, just shifted uncomfortably in her seat while her friends pretended not to notice how quiet she'd gotten. She didn't finish her drink. She didn't order anything else. She left a 20% tip exactly and walked out with her jaw clenched and her chin too high for comfort. I didn't expect an apology, not from her, not ever. But what I got was better. I got the pause. I got the silence. I got the moment where she realized that every smirk, every jab, every "just a waitress" comment had come full circle and now lived in a world where I held the power, and she was the one trying to figure out how to sit comfortably in a chair that wasn't hers. Later that day, once the brunch rush had died down and the line cooks were catching their breath out back, I slipped into my office with a fresh cup of black coffee and the usual end-of-day paperwork. Sitting on my desk were 2 resumes from the week's final round of applications, both candidates vying for the last supervisor slot at our new location. One of them was solid. Good experience, clean references, clearly understood what the job entailed. The other was Vanessa's. I picked hers up, read it one last time like it was a letter from another life, and then without a word, fed it into the shredder. The sound was low and rough and oddly satisfying, paper turning into confetti, future turning into memory. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip from my mug, and stared out the small window at the parking lot where people came and went without ever knowing how much power lived behind the scenes in places like this, places run by women like me, who'd been underestimated for so long we stopped asking for respect and started building places that demanded it. And as the last shred of her resume curled into the bin below, I thought to myself with a small, private smile, funny thing about tables, they always turn.